Our opening words this morning are from Sheila Crosskey. We are surrounded by mystery, but not darkness, uncertainty, but not defeat. We are surrounded by love, for which we may reach out in any time of need and give again to those who need us. Our tradition demands that we be engaged, that we accept life's invitation to think and reflect about what every experience, every insight, every challenge means. And our tradition also demands that we, in response, allow that meaning to shape not just our minds and spirits, but our actions in the world. We are challenged and rewarded by the charge to be responsible seekers of authentic truth. As Unitarian Universalists, we are people of religious conviction who freely seek truth wherever it may be found, through ancient and contemporary texts, through the words of great and humble prophets, through the earth's natural wisdom, and through our own intuition and rational insight, and who strive to responsibly enliven that truth in our every word and deed. And in my mind, that reflects very, very strongly the series that we do on This I Believe. And today we're very honored to welcome Aaron and Megan Carranza, parents of 3, and I'm just amazed and astounded at their ability to get here on Sunday and all of those other things. I had 2, 3 would have been a disaster. And I believe in their outside of church lives, Aaron is with the Water Commission and Megan is with Senator Heidi Heitkamp's office. So welcome to you both, and thanks for being here today with all your beautiful children.
Again, my name is Aaron, and I just want to say again thank you for having me up here and for listening today. I'm just going to share with you my journey that I traveled to get to be where I am today regarding my experiences with water. I'm not at the end of my journey, just merely checking in where I am in this moment. So a little bit of background, I grew up in the suburbs of Minneapolis, land of 10,000 lakes, and even more regulations to protect them. So I have a sister, a brother-in-law, a nephew, an amazing wife, 3 wonderful, independent and children. Alana and Joel are here in attendance as well. And Martin in the back. 8 cats and a timid, fluffy dog. So I developed a love and appreciation for water from a very early age. My family took frequent trips to Duluth, Minnesota. We explored the North Shore of Lake Superior, stayed at local motels, fed seagulls, and hiked in the forests. However, for me, the main attraction was always Lake Superior itself, skipping rocks, marveling at the massive ships, and watching the waves roll in. The vastness of Lake Superior and the power it possesses spoke to me on a level that took me a long time to fully understand. It wasn't until the middle of my college career before I realized not only that is water life, but water was going to be my career life. In college, my favorite space was a place called Ledges State Park, just out of Ames, an area overlooking the Des Moines River. In any season, the unique geologic formations overlooking the expansive floodplain below never failed to bring much-needed calm and perspective to my often troubled college brain. Much like my time along Lake Superior, I spent countless hours simply just watching and reflecting on water. My career started in the suburbs of Minneapolis as a consulting civil engineer, assisting with designs for developments that threaded the needle of water quality and quantity compliance. Even though I was taking Paradise and putting up a parking lot, I was proud of the work I was doing to protect the area's water resources, given the reality that development was inevitable. When the Great Recession hit, just as Megan and I were considering growing our family, I suddenly had unlimited time to consider my career trajectory and purpose. As I scoured the employment opportunities available, I came to the realization that the best fit for me would be in public service. As one with a strong, innate predisposition for following the rules, coupled with a passion for water, public service just clicked with me on multiple levels. As luck would have it, the next employment opportunity I had was with a municipality in the area. Over the course of the following 18 months, I fulfilled a wide spectrum of roles for 2 municipalities in the Twin Cities. From on-the-ground wetland data collection to stream restoration observation to neighborhood stormwater enhancement projects, my time spent in the southern Twin Cities cultivated a more robust understanding of what constitutes sound water resource management in Minnesota. One of the greatest benefits about my new career was the ability for us to actually grow our family. When Maren was born, neither Megan nor I had any intention of moving from our South Minneapolis home, or Minnesota for that matter. However, having a child drastically altered our reality and perspective. What worked for us in the past no longer cut it. After much thought, I applied for and accepted a position with the North Dakota State Agency responsible for managing water resources of the state for the benefit of its people, the State Water Commission. So we pulled up stakes and moved our family to Bismarck. Moving to and working for the state of North Dakota necessitated a perspective shift on my part to be able to guide and empathize with public entities and agricultural producers seeking to enhance water management on their own properties. One of the more difficult aspects for me was the definition of wetlands. In Minnesota, wetlands are defined and protected explicitly, with a benefit given to the wetlands simply by being. In North Dakota, there was a statute providing a specific definition for wetlands and the requirement that wetlands not be lost in an acreage size. But those laws were repealed almost 20 years ago and were not replaced. This is not to say that North Dakota doesn't offer protection for wetlands. Wetlands, and without a definition, in those areas that would otherwise be termed wetlands in North Dakota, are managed from the perspective of potential negative impacts downstream as a result of drainage. It is a different way of viewing the resource, and conscientious management is still an attainable end goal in North Dakota. North Dakota manages water resources for the benefits of its people, whereas Minnesota takes a position that its people are benefited from the management of water resources. Different perspectives, same goal. The Minnesota perspective addresses issues, well, we're going to skip that part. So I guess just to get to the end, so what do I do? What do I believe? Well, I follow the rule of law as explicitly and defensibly as possible. I speak up when interpretations are not supported by law, and testify when proposed changes to the laws and rules appear to conflict with the ability to effectively manage. That is within the context of my career and current employment. On a personal level, I educate my children and those that will listen about the value and beauty of things on this earth that have value simply by being. The water is here before us, and will be here when we're gone. We might as well be mindful stewards with the time we are given. In the words of my grandfather, I am a clown, a lump of the great stardust mud of earth, warmed by the spark of God, to raise my head, to witness and celebrate. Thank you.
If I had known that Aaron was going to end with Grandpa Elmer's quote, I would have offered to go first. So I just need a second. Grandpa Elmer died last summer, and he was an artist, and he was a beautiful person. So I'm sharing today about cultural awareness, concept you're likely familiar with. Cultural competence is a common topic here, as it's woven among the UU principles. It's particularly important to me because I believe my life would have led down a much different path had I not had early experiences to expose me to more of the world, to see both beauty and challenges. I want to try to paint a few pictures for you from my experiences to help draw some real-life connections to the phases of cultural awareness that can occur during immersion in a new culture. I grew up in a North Dakota town of about 900 people. People there had blue eyes and light brown hair. People ate meat and potatoes and lefse. During high school, I was involved and I was pretty content. I didn't question our lifestyle or our similarities. A brief conversation about international adoption sparked my interest in learning Spanish. It was too small a school district to employ foreign language teachers, so I took a Spanish class over satellite TV. There were 3 of us in the class. I only remember making a piñata and watching the movie Selena, which is in English. My Spanish class inspired me to become a teacher. I wanted to be a Spanish teacher who helped kids to see the usefulness of the language, to form relationships, to experience the world. Well, in my first Spanish class in college, the grade I earned myself was a C-. But I'm glad I didn't give up. 2 years later, I signed up to study abroad in Spain. It was obvious for me to choose Spain because I thought Europe would be easy to visit, and the Spanish there must be the original Spanish. At the last minute, I changed my plans to study abroad for a semester in Nicaragua and Costa Rica. Before departing for Nicaragua, I brushed up on Nicaragua's geography and history. But I immediately learned that no amount of looking at maps could have prepared me for this cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic immersion. I had to live it. On day one, I scared the you-know-what out of my host family by not coming home for the evening meal with them. A few days later, I learned the hard way that when my mother asked me if I wanted to give a turn with her, she meant to go for a long walk. For you Spanish speakers, I literally thought dar una vuelta meant to give a turn, like a dance move. Despite my early language and cultural mishaps, I was thrilled to be immersed in this least developed country in Central America. There's no shortage of written material about adjusting to new cultures. Norwegian sociologist Sverre Lisgard's 1955 description of culture shock is still widely respected today. Lisgard wrote, "Adjustment as a process over time seems to follow a U-shaped curve. Adjustment is felt to be easy and successful to begin with, then follows a crisis in which one feels less well adjusted, somewhat lonely and unhappy. Finally, one begins to feel better adjusted again, becoming more integrated into the foreign community. The longer we spend in a new culture, the greater potential we have of experiencing each of these phases and developing a deeper cultural adjustment. The following examples vary in length: moving from a metropolitan area to a rural community, international travel for a week or two, high school foreign exchange for a year, a week-long service trip or mission trip, a semester studying abroad, or making your permanent home in a different country. Whether you're in a new environment for a week or the rest of your life, most people experience some aspect of these four phases that William Howell first gave these names: unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. In other words, you go from ignorance is bliss to I can see that things are different, but I'm not exactly sure how, so I'm going to be cautious, to I can adjust my behavior, but it takes effort, to being culturally appropriate is second nature. The first stage, unconscious incompetence, can be the most dangerous, but least uncomfortable for you. This stage occurs when a person immersed in a foreign environment either does not recognize that cultural differences exist, does not recognize the importance of the impact of culture, or both. In this stage, making mistakes can be common, but lack of knowledge means that they affect you much less than your host culture. And if you don't know what you don't know, ignorance is bliss. Planning and self-exploration prior to departure on your adventure can prevent beginning a trip in the phase of unconscious incompetence. First steps to self-awareness include reflection on what you believe defines culture and how you describe yourself or your own culture or cultures. It's important during the self-identification to consider the invisible aspects of your culture, those large parts of the iceberg that lay below the surface of the water. Examples of these values, norms, and beliefs include things like concept of time, space, and beauty. During this process, try to examine whether your descriptions of yourself are merely your own personality, traits your culture holds, or universal beliefs that most humans may agree with. This exploration can grow your understanding of the development of intercultural sensitivity, the concept of moving from considering other cultures as inferior to our own, or in terms of our own culture, moving from that to adapting our behavior and perhaps beliefs through exposure to other cultures. Tools to explore self and intercultural sensitivity with case studies, journaling tips, and interest inventories are available online and in books with titles like Maximizing Study Abroad. Before I studied abroad, I sadly skipped self and cultural exploration and jumped right into preparation focused on the host culture. A couple tools you can use to prepare yourself prior to immersion in a new culture focusing on the whole host culture include things like speaking, reading, and watching. Speaking, try to meet new people from the place where you intend to travel, or at least speak with people who've traveled there. You might learn something like it's considered rude not to give your host family a gift upon arrival. Reading, There are resources all over. The Intercultural Press and Culturegrams are both culture-specific sources. Travel books often highlight things like tourist attractions, and newspapers from the host culture would show current events like politics, sports, and popular culture. And watching film festival documentaries or movies can be interesting, if not informative. Even watching Selena in English in high school Spanish class was one stepping stone on my path, right? Speaking of reading prior to an immersion experience, prior to my studying abroad, I had to read quite a bit of literature in my college Spanish classes. I remember thinking with disdain at the time, why will reading poetry or novels, what I considered highbrow writing, help me to interact with people who speak Spanish? When I arrived in Nicaragua, it was like a slap in the face. My host father had a love for poetry and enjoyed reading it aloud every evening, and then having a discussion about it. I now realize that the authors I had skimmed over were considered national heroes. I finally saw the relevance in literature and changed my tune. From then on, I actually read the novels and poetry assigned in my Spanish classes, and I got a lot more out of them, both while reading them and afterwards. Preparation prior to landing in a new culture can give many explorers the benefit of avoiding that unconscious incompetence phase and entering what Howell called the second phase of cultural awareness, the conscious incompetence phase. The benefit here lies largely with your host culture, because while they may adapt to you as you learn, you're aware of many of your mistakes and your shortcomings. If you can lower your expectations of yourself, such as your language ability or willingness to explore a bus system rather than avoid it by sending loads of money on taxis, you can learn as you go, and likely you'll be more easygoing in forming new relationships. The third stage, conscious competence, can feel like a relief to you because though you have to think about your actions to make them happen, you've developed ways to understand, accept, and integrate cultural differences. You have the skills to communicate, but you have to tell your brain how and when to use them. A pivotal experience for me occurred in Nicaragua. I was navigating the system of bartering beautifully. I had a command of the language and artisan selling practices so well understood that I knew exactly how to get what I wanted, whether it be a souvenir or some sort of product, for the lowest price possible. I happened across a Canadian couple in the market and watched them buy a hammock. After their purchase, I proudly informed them that they could have gotten it for much less if they had just started lower and then walked away. They politely responded that they were happy to pay the price they did, hoping to provide a living wage to these skilled artisans for their beautiful work. I was instantly conscious of how my incompetence and competence were moving along together, full speed ahead. The last phase of cultural awareness Howell named unconscious competence, because the effort previously required to be effective across cultures becomes natural and intuitive, unconscious in this phase. This doesn't mean that your language must be fluent or that you assimilate completely, but it does mean that you navigate this whole host culture more easily. What I think is beautiful about exposure to different cultures or becoming more cross-culturally competent is that there isn't one event or experience in particular that enhances our cultural competence. It's the process of becoming aware through some trial and error, probably a lot of questions and reflection that brings about more cultural awareness. After having spent 6 weeks in Nicaragua, I was certain that I knew what to expect from life across all of Central America. Wrong. Just as I thought I had Nicaragua all figured out, I hopped on a bus to Costa Rica. Culture shock again. Costa Rica seemed to be almost indiscernible, except the climate and landscape, from the U.S. I wanted to be back in Nicaragua because I had a newfound belief that compared to the U.S., people in Nicaragua were much happier despite having less. I went through a new process of cultural awareness in Costa Rica. And prior to arriving in Costa Rica, I figured living with a new host family there would be my biggest adjustment. But what I really spent a lot of time analyzing was the socioeconomics. Think. Wishing for orphans and ruins of Nicaragua instead of beaches and organic vegetarian restaurants of Costa Rica. While studying abroad during college, I experienced 4 host countries that were new to me. The length of time I spent in each country varied, and I experienced a new type of cultural adjustment in each. I did eventually end up going to Spain. When I return home, people often asked me, how was studying abroad? And I'd say good, thinking my good had a comma after it, so I could unload on them for at least a week about all the things I learned about myself and the world. But I think they all heard me say good with a period after it, and that was usually the end of the conversation. I quickly found that adjusting to my former life in college in the U.S. was just as hard, or maybe harder, than the cultural adjustments I made while studying abroad. First of all, time hadn't stood still while I was away. And second, I expected differences when I went to the new foreign places, but hadn't considered that my personal growth would mean culture shock for me, fitting back into a life in the U.S. I had changed, I thought for the better, but I don't assume that opinion was unanimous. Each of my 4 career experiences and student loans has deep connections to my study abroad experience and the path I followed. I also believe that my study abroad experiences and cultural awareness carved my path to becoming a member of this fellowship. Thank you.
Mission on Common Worship. To walk purposefully in light truth sheds, steadily in the openness justice creates, and compassionately in the warmth love radiates, shall advance us surely toward the good, and shall in the end make us responsibly on the earth and fit companions for one another. Blessed be, go in peace. Have a wonderful week. Thank you for being here.